Welcome to the Alphagenix podcast, where every week we talk to incredible guests from around the world of biohacking, well-being, men's health, and more. Here's your host, co-founder of Alphagenix, Ross Tompkins.
Well, I'm delighted to welcome today's guest. We have Artur Zolkiewicz, performance coach. We met earlier this year in London at the Health Optimisation Summit, of course, and stayed in touch, and we've had some great conversations since then. But for people that have never met you before, who are you and what do you do?
So my name is Artur, as you mentioned before. I am a performance coach mainly, so I operate in that sort of very broadly understood wellness, fitness, and health optimization area, with a very broad interest in, I would say, performance optimization and performance coaching. Apart from that, I also have different projects, businesses. But so I'm, I guess you could call me an entrepreneur, even though I hate that term for some reason. But I have a company that which we're working on premium high quality fitness accessories, very innovative stuff, very high quality. I'm also working on consulting high-end hospitality establishments on their wellness fitness setups as well, health optimization. And apart from that, I'm also working on opening a luxury wellness club in central London. So that's sort of a very broadly and quickly to me. My journey with fitness and health started very early on. So I started training karate when I was 8, and I was back in Poland, and also grew up being vegetarian in Poland, which is, as you can imagine, probably quite something. I'm no longer vegetarian. Before that agitates anyone, I have been sort of through being vegetarian for the first 24 years of my life, then switching to a pescatarian diet, and then last year going full carnivore. But what I'm saying is because that always sort of made me aware of nutrition and different nutritional protocols and how they can how you can optimize them for performance, because also in in sports. And apart from that, I was academically my master's degree is actually in science of communication, so there was a lot of sort of journalism, but also corporate communications. And then how I started in coaching people actually was when I was traveling as a model, and I just got asked by a lot of people if I could help them with their training. And that's how it sort of started a long time ago. Now, when I moved to London 9 years ago, I started to take it more seriously. And then I started training, working with clients one-to-one, and then sort of traveling with clients as well to various different places. So it took me working also with hotels in places like Mexico, Indonesia, France, Italy, Greece, and a bunch of other places. So it's, as you can see, it's a sort of very all over the place type of thing. But everything has one common thing, and that's health, wellness, and fitness.
Love it. I bet lots of people watching thinking, that sounds incredible. You just travel all over the world doing these cool things, opening up luxury high-end brands in London and hotels in Indonesia. It sounds wonderful.
It's it's I guess I don't know. It's maybe a bit of the. It's a very popular term, undiagnosed ADHD. I don't think that's it, but I just like doing a lot of stuff. But equally, I'm trying to focus everything in that one area of optimizing spaces, optimizing people, and optimizing the way we live our lives, essentially. And that, if you think about it, can range such different broad spectrums that it's. I think that's why we're having this conversation. That's why we had such interesting conversations before.
Yeah, absolutely. Wellness touches upon so many areas of our life. One big one, of course, is diet. And you were 20 years vegetarian, then pescatarian, now carnivore. Have to ask, what prompted the change, and have you noticed that one is better suited for you?
Vegetarian was strange in a way that the place I grew up in is Poland is a very much a meat-eating society, right? So if you think of a Polish sort of Eastern European cuisine, it's all surrounded by sort of meat, stews, and potato, and sausages and all that stuff. So that was never. And growing up, and I was born in 1985, and my parents turned vegetarian 1987, so I was 2 years old. So that in itself was strange for everyone surrounding us, because nobody even I'll tell you. I used to go to a lot since I was 8. I used to go to a lot of karate competitions, and when I would go to a karate competition, and that was already the early 90s, mid 90s. Dietitians would give me chicken because they thought it was vegetarian. So there was that level of lack of knowledge, And my parents, just simply because they were sort of very much into yoga, exploring different philosophies, and meat-eating society. I think about Polish food is usually sausages and meat and stews and sort of heavy food, warm food. And they went into it. They were always very curious about various different practices, such as yoga and meditation. And my father, I remember, used to fast every Friday, not for religious reasons, but simply because he was curious about it. So they decided to be vegetarians. And then a few years later, I actually. So my mom very quickly. My dad, I think, was vegetarian for about 10 years, maybe 10 to 12 years. But I sort of stayed because it wasn't. And people always used to ask me, "Oh, don't you miss it?" And I just don't know what I miss, because I've never had it. So it's as simple as that. And tell you a funny story. When I used to go to karate a lot, to sort of competitions and workshops, weekends away with it was all pretty much all my life competing and with friends, and some of them, I was mid 90s, dietitians would give me chicken just because they thought it was vegetarian. So there was that level of sort of knowledge about the diet, right? So as you can imagine, I was also, kids at school would be very surprised by me not eating meat, because that was one of the things that people, everyone did. So it was very much out of the ordinary. And that's why there was. Having said that, my mom was always, even when after she had started eating meat again, she would always cook an extra meal for me. She was always very much into researching what's good, what's not good. So my dad, we always there was a lot of vegetables. I ate eggs, I ate all that stuff. So it was always very nutritious in a way. And if you think about it, back then, there was no fake vegan meat. There was no, that just didn't exist. So there was no Impossible Burgers and all that stuff. So you sort of I ate a very clean diet in a way. My mom would never give me any soft drinks. I would never have, apart from like natural fruit juices, and I'll never have it, which back then obviously I hated her for, but now I'm really appreciative of it. So yeah, it was for a while, it just made me very stubborn, because people were, oh, just try it, in fact, in kindergarten, once the teachers brought me some meat. They were like, oh, we will fix you, because you. And I took the whole plate and threw it on the floor. And ever since that moment, every single child had to bring their own food to school. So I was a bit of a rebel like that. So yeah, that's, being vegetarian it wasn't difficult, because my mom always used to take care of it. It was difficult anywhere else, right? So if I wasn't at home, they wouldn't know what it was. So they didn't understand that someone could not eat meat and fish. So that's, it was interesting to think, and it's interesting to think back to it as well.
And then after 20 years, you said you then switched it up and you started adding fish in. What prompted that? And did you notice a difference to your body, to your body composition, energy levels, brain function, anything?
So I was 24 when I started eating meat, and I was away for a year modeling in Asia and modeling. So, I went on a trip, different countries, different contracts. And weirdly, I didn't start eating fish in Asia. I started, so I was, at the time I was based in Austria. I went to university in Vienna, and I got back, And for some reason, I said, I had been thinking about it for a while. And I said, you know what, I'll just try fish. And I remember living with one of my closest friends, and he prepared something that is, even today I won't have it. So it was, sort of like a curd cheese thing with avocado and with tuna, just because it was a high protein content, and it was and some salt and pepper, maybe a little olive oil, right? So I was like, oh, I'm starting to eat fish. Just let me try this. And I tried it. I was like, this is not good. But then to say sorry for treating me to my first tuna in my life in that way, his parents and him, they took me out for a really good dinner, and I had first dinner I had sashimi, and I really liked it. Did I notice any difference? It was much easier to get protein, get access to source of protein. Even though I didn't eat meat, I ate fish. I also, it was probably, it's when I was serious about my training for a long time before that, and I was sort of getting in a better shape. But maybe because there was sort of the novice benefit of being new to it, or relatively new to it, lifting weights and getting all for like a few years. So you get those gains to start with just because your body gets the stimulus, right? But then further down the line, you have to sort of introduce more intricate things such as diet and lifestyle and all these changes. So it's hard to pin it down to one thing, such as eating more fish, because I had eaten eggs, I ate dairy. Probably less congested though, which might have been the reason why I also why I sort of wanted more variety in my diet, and that was it also the reason why was variety. So I was just what if I would go out for dinner or lunch, I just wanted to be able to choose more. And similarly, meat is this similar decision. That was last year, last August. It was a very similar thing. So I'm a very introspective person. So sometimes I just question things, right? I like questioning things ever so often. So with meat, two things prompted that. Number one, I've been, my diet, just because my life got busier. And, as the life gets busier, normally what I advise people upon, your diet doesn't necessarily get worse, but less varied, which I think is not a good thing, right? So for me, I was like, oh, I wish I could, at some point I caught myself thinking, oh, I wish just I ate chicken or I ate some beef, because that would be so much easier, right? Then I remember going out with a friend for dinner, really nice restaurant, and the only fish they had was monkfish, and then apart from that was meat, some good meat choices, and pasta, and things that I normally don't really eat that often. So, and that was just also like, I wish it's just I ate meat. And I was like, okay, why don't I actually eat meat? It's not because I believe, no, don't get me wrong, I believe in sustainable, sustainability in the whole food ecosystem. But it wasn't my primary reason why I stopped eating meat, right? So my primary reason was that my parents decided to stop eating meat, and then I stopped as well. So it's, so I just then decided, well, I'll give it a go. And I went to see my parents in Poland, and I said to my mom, oh, I think I want some chicken. And my mom goes, okay, I'll grill you a chicken. She didn't even hesitate, My dad, however, was like, oh, don't. I was like, why not? And I was, oh, you know what, you're actually right. So, and I initially started poultry, and then introduced that slightly more, I had venison, I had beef, and I love beef now. So yeah, but having said that, I think all that nutritional history of mine has helped me to really vary my food. So I don't mind having vegan days, but I also don't mind having vegetarian days or meat days, so it's very, now I think it's what I wanted. It's more of a very varied plate that I can have. It took me a while, but it's good.
I was going to say that it must be good because you've been on every side, if you like, from vegetarian, pescatarian, carnivore. So when a client comes to you and they're like, what should I do with my diet? I guess you're able to talk from both sides or both camps. And I think, and you mentioned a little bit about it earlier, I think when you really drill down into at one extreme, veganism, and the other extreme, pure carnivore diets, what they do tend to agree on is it should be natural whole foods that you're eating. They agree that it shouldn't be processed food. If it's got an ingredients list on the back, don't probably put it in your mouth. So there's a lot of overlap, I think, when you break it down to that granular level. And I think there probably isn't a perfect diet. We all look different on the outside. We shouldn't be surprised our insides are different too. So some people perhaps thrive on one, others on another.
I think it always depends. It depends on. I always say that nutrition is such a personal, subjective thing in our lives, just because we associate so many different components with it. Your feelings, the way you grew up, the way the foods that or meals that you have emotional attachment to, because it reminds you of something. The things, when you stress, the food that you reach for when you stress. So there's just so many different factors that flow into it that having a meal plan could work for one person, but it's not necessarily going to work for everyone. So I agree with you. I think it just always depends. There's never a simple and straight answer, I think.
Yeah. Was there, you mentioned before you went off modeling around Asia. Was there pressure on you at that point, to look a certain way? So were you very careful about what you ate? Presumably you are employed to look a certain way. So was it controlling in terms of your diet?
So initially, before I got into modeling, I was very much in that martial arts community, and think karate now is sort of looked upon a little bit. Oh, it's a martial arts, sort of like a mag dojo type of thing where people give away belts, but it certainly wasn't that back then. And I remember my trainings when I was 8, 9. There was one teacher and 120 kids in the sports hall, and it would be silent, right? So it would be and my coach, who was a very super clever guy, PhD in social sciences, but also very sort of like an alpha male martial artist, and he always very much had control over it. So it was I was always very performance orientated. So for me, competition was much more about who can win on the mats rather than who can win by looking better, if that makes sense. If you go to audition and casting, obviously now it's more about personality. It's a lot about personality, but it's also a lot about the way you look. So initially I got into training for the reasons of performance rather than the aesthetic part of it, mm-hmm. Right? And I remember when I got into modeling, it was a pure coincidence. Actually, my very first girlfriend asked, she said, "Oh, you should be a model," and then she sent my pictures to a modeling competition. She didn't get in, I did, which was quite funny. And then I sort of, when I was still in Poland at the time, and I didn't really do it because it was far away, and I was, went to university for my first year in Poland. So I focused more on sort of, martial arts, etc. But when I moved to Vienna, I said it's a good student job to have, because for a relative short amount of time, you can get a relative high amount of money, and it also can allow you to travel. But that's when I got into the more aesthetic component of training, because I went into a modeling agency, and they were like, "Oh, you don't have a six-pack. We don't want to have you in our books. Even once you have one, you come back and we'll have you," right? So there was like, oh, that was sort of like an obvious thing, but for me it wasn't. I was just like, oh, okay, well, I have. And I sort of got into it saying, I started lifting weights when I was about 20, and then so initially I was like, oh, it's just going to be easy, it's fine, like I'll do it. But it wasn't as easy as I thought it would be. But initially the first year my body changed a lot, and I noticed that it supported so many areas of my life. Not only the aesthetic part, obviously is an important component of it, because we, as human beings, we like looking good, and we like to think we're attractive to the opposite or to other people. So obviously that always has been a component, and I think a lot of people get into training in the first place because of the way they want to look. But I think it's pretty much, I recently had this conversation with someone. Everyone starts a journey because of the desired outcome that they want to have out of it, right? But that's just not going to keep you going, because at some point, if you start a business, it's because you want to, make a lot of money, or you want to sell the business. But then you realize the purpose that you find when you're building that business is much more important, much more motivates you much more than just that sum of money that you might get at some point. Same with training. People get into training because they want to look a certain way. When they start looking a certain way, at least some people, they just realize it's just so much more important for health, longevity, for so many other areas of their life, for the way they perceived by other people, for their mental health, but also for the things like bone health, and when you get older, it just gets so much more important. So I think the aesthetic part is what got me into training first, and what gets, I think, a lot of people into training. But then you realize that it's so much more important. I digressed. I realized that, but yes. So for a long time, it would be very restrictive, but it made me try a lot of different things, right? So I've tried intermittent fasting. I started intermittent fasting in 2010. Before that, it was even 11. So before that was even a thing, right? So before, there was one website called leangains.com, and there was a guy who was sort of like an ex-model / turned bodybuilder, and he would start fasting for aesthetic reasons, and and I, at the time, I was sort of part of a startup, and I was studying, and I was training boxing and wrestling and jiu-jitsu and karate and all this stuff, and I would always carry boxes of food with me around, and it was just like, oh, this is this new thing, I'll try it. And that's way before everyone spoke about fasting. And so I tried lots of years. I tried low carb, ketogenic diets. There's always a restrictive part of it, in a way, so I went cold turkey with alcohol for a few years, just because I thought, I didn't need it, and it would help. But up until a certain point, it was all about being in a good shape. But then it sort of became more of a curiosity and pushing the boundaries and saying what can be done in what way, right? And then you find what works best for you, right? So for a long time, I was low carbohydrate diet. I don't actually think it served me that well in hindsight, but it's you learn it by doing, I think. So I have tried a whole bunch of things, I think, in my life in terms of dieting.
Yeah. I love that, and I think you touched upon something there I think is really important, and it's when you try all these different things, and it pushes you to, I guess, see what you're capable of, and see what works for you. Right? And you mentioned fasting. I did a 7-day water fast earlier this year, and people talk about having this burst of energy after 4 days, and you're going to feel incredible. And I didn't get any of that. But what was fascinating was I didn't actually get hungry until about 4 days. Everything before that was like a programmed response. So I would be like, oh, it's 12 o'clock, it's lunchtime. It's 5 o'clock, my kids have got in from school, it's tea time. And then I'd go, I'm not actually hungry. It's just like a Pavlov's dog response, with the bell ringing. By day 4, I did start to get hungry. By day 7, every single conversation I was having revolved around food. That's all I could think about. But the real benefit I got out of it was a sense of achievement. Like it was the psychological benefit that I got rather than a physical benefit. I was like, wow, before then, I think the longest I'd ever done was about 48 hours. So it was such a big jump. But it was great to see sort of what I was capable of, I guess.
And that's amazing. And I think, obviously testing anything is always within a certain safety parameters, right? So you don't want to overstep. And if you didn't have any experience with fasting, 48 hours already for a lot of people would be a long time, right? But I think whatever one tests, we should always be aware of it can be dangerous. So we always have to think about that. But I think the sense of being able to sort of ask questions and push yourself is what is the quality that I look in for in people, look for in people. So that's something that I just really I just connect with this type of of people.
Yeah. So do you look for that in the clients you work with, and you kind of try and find their levers and pull them to help them, I guess, become the best version of themselves?
It depends. It just depends. You want to get to know the person you work with, right? So number one, and people come to me for different reasons. As in, the obvious thing is, okay, I'm a personal trainer, and that's what sort of people come to me for. So it's mainly physical training, right? But there's also so much more to it. So I've built relationships with the clients I have, and you have to be very careful, because sometimes it becomes too friendly, because we are friends outside of our training hours, our meetings. But equally, you also want to build trust with other people. I tend to work with quite high profile people, and it's these people usually don't listen to anyone. They a lot of them at least, so they don't like being told what to do. So that's number one, right? Number two, I think it always depends. Some people don't want to. Some people, as sad as it sounds, some people train just because they feel guilty, right? So just because they feel like they have to, it's part of it, and it's fine, and that's their reason. You can try and have a conversation. You can try and work on their why, but it's okay not to change it sometimes, because for some people that's not the main thing. In terms of health, some people don't want to know that much about their health data and outcomes and risks, and some people are just not comfortable thinking about, okay, something might go wrong with my body, and that's okay too, right? So it's my some of my clients wear the Whoop, and some of them a tracking device, and some of them don't even see the data. I would look at the data just because they get affected by the data, right? So there's just so much that goes into a person, that it's really hard to answer this sort of general question. What do I look for in people? But it depends. It always depends. I think it does depends, and it takes a while for some people to open up as well, to give their to give you the reasons why. Some people open up straight away, and it's just way too much, and so ooh. And I tend to work with other professionals as well. So mental health professionals, I tend to physiotherapists, doctors, functional medicine doctors. So I have all these people in my network, so that I can, if I feel something is out of the scope of my knowledge and my, I would just refer them out, and I try to sort of establish that network of people, so that we can collectively help that individual.
Yeah, I love that. We are such complex creatures. There's many people that can help to make the whole. It was interesting you mentioned about technology there, because I remember last year I was hiking up a mountain, and I said to somebody, "How do you feel?" And he went, "Oh, hang on." Checked his watch. He looked at an app on his phone, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm okay." And I was like, "Wow, this is fascinating." Like I just wanted you to, yeah, I'm fine. I feel great. I'm a little bit tired or whatever, but he had to check with all this technology how he actually felt. And I think for some people it can be too much information, rather than just tapping into our intuition, or tapping into our emotions, or how do we actually feel at any given time.
Technology is such an interesting topic, because I'm going actually in January. I'm going to the CES, which is Consumer Electronics Show. It's a show in Las Vegas. It's sort of the biggest tech show in the world, and they have everything, from flying Ubers to robots, AI, but also a lot of sort of digital health, wellness, and fitness, which it's the, and I had last time I went was 2020, January 2020, so before the breakout of COVID. And back then it was fascinating. There were devices that would help you to that would help to learn how to fall asleep faster, quicker, just by utilizing brain waves, and bunch of stuff, like a yoga room in which you would get instant biofeedback as to what symmetry in your body works well, what doesn't, which doesn't, and then which, based upon heat cameras, which parts of your body are inflamed, crazy stuff. And that was 4 years ago. So I'm very excited to see what's happening now. And technology is can help, but I think what it is doing, and I love your example, because it does put us out of touch with ourselves. And it's like almost like it's being avoidant about knowing who we are. So try and sit in silence for an extended period of time. So many people can't do it. Frankly, I can't do it. So that's my new challenge, that I'm trying to just sit still for 5 minutes, and not meditate, because it's something to do, but not do anything, just be there with your thoughts. And I think it's similar with health. Sometimes people are so disconnected from how they feel. I ask some people, how do you feel? And they're like, I don't know. I have no idea. Like, don't ask me. It's not something I know. It's just, wow, this should be the primary thing you should know, right? But it's not, it's not a judgmental thing I'm saying here, but it is, I think, the disconnect between our brains and our bodies and our souls and our bodies is just growing apart, and technology it's not helping it, at least not yet.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So, do you work with people via technology? Is it remote when you have people sort of all over the world, or do people come and see you in London?
I have clients that work with me in a sort of, I like working in details. I'm working on a different platform that will probably allow me to work on a slightly larger scale, implementing my thinking and my sort of way of training and my way of thinking about mindset, nutrition, and all those components of performance. But that's a project that's probably going to take me another half a year or so. But I am at the moment working with people. Have a few clients in Italy, have a few clients around the world that work with me very closely. So I'll take care of nutrition, but not meal plans, but nutritional coaching, right? So creating new habits, creating behaviors, so that my goal is, for people to, when they don't have me, then they go to the kitchen or the gym, or they wake up in the morning, or they go to sleep, so they know themselves how to do it. So I see myself more of a sort of I'm more the educator, more the teacher, rather than standing there and saying, oh, you have to this, you have to this. Now trying to teach people, it doesn't always work out the way I want it to, because it's not as straightforward. It always sounds better than it is, but that's my goal. That's ultimately, I want people to know what to do themselves, and not having to ask me for help, or ask anyone else for that matter.
Yeah, that makes sense. And do you have like a sort of a methodology that you follow? So you assess the physical aspects of the body, you assess the mindset, and then you look at the diet. Do you break it up like that?
I like to look at overall, so diet, mindset, and the physicality of a person usually go hand in hand. So there's usually a connection between why they eat what they eat at a certain time, or why do they go to sleep in the evenings? It's like way too late, or I'm that mindset coaching. I do it as a part of sort of the training side of things. So the clients I work with, we have conversations, and they're about everything. So pretty much they're very broadly understood performance. So the question I'll ask them is, how do you feel, but also how do you sleep? Why did you go to sleep that late? What do you think? But never sort of in a judgmental way, but very much in sort of an interview, just like what we're doing now, having a conversation and trying to put one and one together, and think of unconventional ways of trying to help them, or conventional in a way that it's very personalized to how they live their lives, right? And it's very individualized, I would say, with everyone I work with.
Yeah, it depends on what they want, I guess, what their goals are, and you can tailor a program to that.
Yeah, and it's always a matter of conversation, of having a conversation, understanding, why do they want to get where they want to get to. So what's the motivation, and how I can help, right? If I can help. Sometimes I cannot help. Sometimes I'm not a psychotherapist. I'm not a psychologist. Initially I was a trainer, and I'm morphed more into sort of a performance coach, because I like working with people that have larger goals in terms of their health and the sort of broadly understood health, right? But again, that's why I work with doctors, because some of it it's not in my not not my ability and not my knowledge. So I much rather refer people out and then work with. So I'm sort of, if you look at the room, I don't take care of one chair. I take care of the design, I would say. So it's more like to sort of design the whole thing for them by implementing the right people as well, and just helping them in that way.
Yeah, that makes sense. What do you do when, because one of the biggest problems I'm sure a lot of people have is when they travel. And if you're working with, I guess, high profile clients that travel must come into this quite often, do you have any hints, tips, hacks, or tricks, that you can teach people, and perhaps that some of our viewers can take away? Because I know we get this time and time again, I was doing okay, and then I had a long day in the car, or I went on holiday, or whatever it is. So yeah, over to you.
It depends on travel. So I have some tools that I use for jet lag, for example, right? So when people fly a long time, if they're willing to do it, because it always implies work, right? So traveling is stressful already for a lot of people. So adding on some extra things to do, it's always work, right? I usually would, if people fly a long distance, I would say just try and fast, or try and reduce the amount of food that you eat, because you don't move anyway, and you just don't really need that food when you're up in the air. If it's a 12-hour flight, you can easily do it. Maybe have something right before traveling. Then also I use an app called Time Shifter, which helps people. It's an amazing app. I've been using it for a few years now. No association with them whatsoever, but they essentially, what you do, you would input your flight details, your destination, and it works out the schedule for you, in which you sort of follow the steps, right? So it's all about light exposure, and it's all about caffeine intake as well, melatonin if you want to use that. And it really works in a way that, for example, I go to California quite frequently. I never get jet lagged. I'll go to sleep at 11 and I wake up at 6 a.m. in the morning, and I'm maybe, first night I will wake up once, but it really, in comparison to what it used to be, it's so much better. All it takes, you have to wear sunglasses in the morning sometimes for an extended period of time when nobody expects you to wear sunglasses, but it really works. And there are tools that I always recommend people do. A lot of people don't want to follow them because it's, again, as I said, it's work. But in terms of diet, and when people go on holidays, to be very open with you, I always say, listen, enjoy your holidays. If they don't go too often on holidays, and more often than not, people come back and they're much more rested. If they don't overdo things like alcohol and other whatever they might do, if they usually have more sun, they have more sun exposure, they have more sleep, they have time spent with their friends and family, and that sometimes, a lot of times, the body composition improves, just because I think maybe the endocrine system adjusts a little bit. They have more of a quality time, slightly less stress maybe, and all these things. Even though I didn't measure anything, but I see that with a lot of people. Business travel, I always tell people, especially the busy ones, I would say, try and go to the gym. Just make sure it's like a meeting, right? It's an hour in the morning, maybe every morning or every other morning, but make sure that you do it. And if they need a program, I'll put the program together for them. In terms of the food choices, I can even go as far as, send me whatever is on the menu in the restaurant. I'll tell you what I think you should have, right? And then sleep schedule. So that usually would be covered by time shifter if they travel far. But that's always the ideal scenario. So that's always sort of this. If you want to perform at your highest optimal level, this is what you need to do, right? But then if you think about the reality, is people have social life as well, right? So when they travel, they would meet friends, they'll have business meetings. Sometimes they need to have some drinks. So sometimes it goes, instead of wine, have some, have something like a vodka soda, whatever you feel better afterwards, so that you don't feel tired, and that doesn't affect your performance the next day, right? So things, it's sometimes not about being optimal and ideal and amazing all the time. It's about being the best you can be at the given circumstances, right? So it doesn't, for me, sometimes, my Whoop data would tell me, oh, you have 36% recovery. You should take it easy today. But in myself, I feel good. So I'll go to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I'll go to kickboxing.
Wow.
And mentally that serves me well. So it's almost an assessment thing, right? So that's the same for people when they travel and they're stressed. There's always, but establishing habits and rules and behaviors is the most important thing one can do. So that when you have sweets at home, you probably will eat them. So just don't have them, right? So very, very simple things like that. But people always ask, that simple? But yeah, it is that simple, right? So it's simple things day in, day out. It's just like running a business. It's simple things day in and day out. It's just sort of it's the consistency in the work that you do, and I think that will eventually bring you to where you want to be.
Yeah, well, small consistent steps daily add up over time.
Yeah,
I was smiling to myself when you were talking there because one, we have sweets in the house with my children, and I find it hard to resist. And actually, when I'm traveling for business, and indeed sometimes even on holiday, I find it easier to get into a good routine. I go to the gym every morning. My diet is better. There's no Kit Kats in the kitchen, So I find it better. I find it easier when I travel. And then I come back, and again, it's busy, and there's chocolate in the kitchen, and I'm like,
it's it's all about building up. I'll tell you one funny thing. So a long time ago, so if you're right-handed, if you use your left hand, you can increase your brain neuroplasticity. That's a very simple way of the. So doing something that's unusual, essentially, an unusual task, right? And there's ways you can train people within a physical training session. You can train them up so that they actually train their neuroplasticity. So just they grow new brain connections between the brain cells, right? So one of the things is, so what you can do, a very simple thing, you can if you're right-handed, you can brush your teeth with your left hand, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and the funny thing is, just because it's not my habit, and I do it over and over again when I remember it, but I keep forgetting it because it's not, it's my brain doesn't work to make myself better. So every single morning, and then an hour later, I'm like, I was supposed to do it. Just so it's, I think once you get into a habit of doing things. So now what I have like a piece of paper on on the mirror in the bathroom, left hand, and that's it. So that's now that works. And actually, it also wakes you up. So there's little tricks, and so establishing, what I mean by that, when I'm going with this, is that establishing the rules for yourself. That, and almost like, at least for me, it works, and for a lot of people that I know that works as well. Gamifying stuff, right? So gamifying so that it becomes more interesting rather than a chore. So that it's sort of a fun thing to do rather than I just annoying, I have to do it again. So, and I agree with sometimes the everyday life, when it becomes boring, that's where we sort of look for instant gratification so that we feel better, and that's when it's easier to just slip off off our routines. And it's never straightforward, but that's what makes it fun as well, on the other hand.
Yeah, absolutely. I seem to find it in Kit Kats quite often. But
so used to be M&Ms for me.
So do you work with men and women? Do you work just with one gender?
Men and women, although recently I've been working more with men, I think. I've done a few podcasts on sort of male mental health, even though I'm not qualified to speak about it, but from a very sort of perspective of a martial artist and someone who works with men on that in that capacity. But I work with everyone pretty much. I also work with kids sometimes. So young kids. I used to teach karate to. We had, my friend and I, we had the same tuna friend. We had a karate. We used to teach karate classes, were karate workshops, and so I worked with pretty much everyone. And my first gym I have ever worked at when I was in university was a female only gym, whereby we would have only between members between 16 to 85 years old. So there was a very broad spectrum of people that I worked with, and I think it's enjoyable to work with anyone. And the truth is that if you as a coach, whatever you coach, I think if you don't connect with your client, you're not going to work with them for a very long time. So you need to find a common language with everyone you work with, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So if people have been watching this and they have already started to form a connection with you, they think, yeah, I definitely want to work with Artur. It's going to help me reach my goals. Where do they find you? We've got your Instagram handle there, but are there any websites, or is there anywhere where they can reach out to you directly?
So just like my first name and my surname, which is quite hard to spell, but I hope if people watch it and they see it right here, so it's easy. So the website goes the same here, so arturzolkiewicz.com. They can find me there, can reach out. And my Instagram, I'm always, people, usually I use Instagram a lot for communicating with people. And as I said, I'm working on a sort of training platform where I'll be trying to implement the one-to-one to a broader audience so that I can work with more people.
Fantastic. Share your message wide across the whole world.
Yeah, I would love to do it. So we can engage with more people. It's always fun.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. So let you get back to your evening, but hopefully we'll get this out. Share this with everyone on our lists and to all of our different channels. If anyone wants to reach out, obviously now they know where they can find you. But it's been a real pleasure. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ross. Appreciate it. Appreciate your time.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Alphagenix podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss next week's episode. For more resources on Alphagenix and men's health, visit alphagenix.co.uk. Until next time.